This week, I'll be throwing and trimming a simple angular vase from about 2 pounds of high iron stoneware clay. Despite the pinky red tone it has here, once fired, it'll be more on the grey side, although since I'll be reduction firing it in a gas kiln, it'll be flashed red and orange in places and speckled with thousands of dots of iron, which are drawn to the surface via the reduction firing process itself. I won't speak about that in any more depth here, but I do have another video which discusses that entire process in much greater detail, and I'll leave a link on screen to it now and in the description below. As always, this process begins with the clay being centered. This is the procedure of moving the clay around in such a way that it comes to reside perfectly in the middle of the wheel, so there aren't any bumps, wobbles, undulations, or any other inconsistencies in it. The shape I'll be making will have very angular walls, and when it really comes to defining the shape at the end of this throwing process, it's then when tiny things like air pockets can become a real nuisance. With the clay centered, I use my thumb and index finger to push down in the middle to create both a well and to form the base of the pot. And already at this point you can see the rudimentary parts which make up a pot. There's the base, the walls, and the rim. But at this point they're all very thick and heavy. And through the remainder of this process, this clay will be pinched upwards, the walls thinned out, and the angular vase formed. Once the base of the pot has been compressed for a few moments, which helps to prevent it from cracking later on, I tuck a knuckle into the base, which is met by the pads of my fingers inside the vessel, and together they squeeze and move upwards, dragging the clay with it through a gap in my hands which gets progressively smaller, and thus thinning out the walls. With each pull of clay, it's necessary to make sure the walls, and the inside of the pot too, are well lubricated. If the walls of the pot or your hands dry out too much during this process, they'll stick to each other, and when the pot begins sticking to your hands, the whole thing becomes more difficult to control. In a way, we want the clay to glide through the parameters we set upon it, and that's only really possible with the use of water and slip, which I consistently pour over the walls and my hands, so that there isn't any friction. And in the moment I do feel friction building up, I'll take one hand off the vessel, scoop up some water, and douse it over the pot. One of the keys to pulling up the walls effectively is to keep a steady pace from the moment you pinch in at the bottom until the time you decide to release them closer to the top. If initially you pinch the clay at the bottom and then move your hands up erratically as the clay is drawn up, you'll end up with walls that reflect that are thicker or thinner in patches, and all of that will make it more likely for either a wobble to form in the walls of the pot or for it to even collapse. With that being said, you shouldn't let something like a tiny wobble in the rim stop you from throwing the pot. Sometimes it just happens, and there's really very little you can do to prevent that. You'll see it with this piece a bit further down the line, but I'm easily able to correct the rim by slicing away the top few millimeters with a sharp potter's needle. Once the height is roughly there, I'll gradually begin to push the form out, creating a form that's initially more rounded before the distinct angles are added later on. It's at this point that the wobble in the rim became very apparent, but as it only affects the rim of the pot and doesn't influence the walls beneath it, I won't get rid of it until it comes to refining that point of the vessel. I have quite a few rules in my making. They're self-imposed, and they're there to make sure that the pots I throw all look as if they're from the same family. One of those is for angular forms like this, be it vases or lidded jars. More specifically, it's for the ones with narrow bases, like this. And the rule is that the lower angular section should account for roughly half the height of the vessel. That way it retains a certain level of elegance. And I've made some where this lower angular section accounts for say a third of the pot, and they immediately look a bit more stout and clumsy. At this point I'm straightening the waist section, and then I'll do the shoulder and the lip on top. At this point I'm very careful not to make any sudden movements, as the overhanging top is quite thin and soft, and it would only take one wrong movement to accidentally cause it to flop inwards. And finally it's time to remove the undulation in the rim, which is done by carefully slicing away the top few millimeters by inserting a sharp potter's needle gradually through the rim, and once I know that the needle has punctured through the whole way around, I lift away my potter's needle and the excess clay. In most cases it comes off neatly, other times the thin slither of clay falls back into the pot and I have to fish it back out. Once the rim has been corrected, I can throw that section of the pot, beveling the inner walls out to a fine point on the lip. It's through the thickness of the rim that you'll perceive the weight of the pot. If instead I left it thick and bulky and squared off, just by looking at the pot you might think it's quite hefty. If instead it's thrown to a very fine point, you perceive the opposite, and you'll think the pot will be very light and delicate. And that's the world I want my pots to be in. Shaping these is a gradual process, and the walls at this point, once stretched out so much, are very thin around the midsection and the top, but I have left some thickness in the lower portion of the pot to both support the shape of the vessel, and so there's enough clay that I can lift the pot away from the wheel from, without the lower, angular walls just being distorted as my hands clasp around them and lift the pot off to one side. And to do just the final bit of shaping, I use a throwing stick, the end of which is dipped in slip so that it doesn't stick to the clay on the inside, and then I gently push out with it. That's it for the throwing. Next I'll move on to the finishing procedure, which remains the same for all the pots I make. For this piece I removed some of the excess clay from around the base, which I needn't have done, as it could have just as easily been trimmed away later once the pot's leather hard. Then I use an assortment of tools, mostly metal and with a flat side to them, to scrape away the slip on the outside of the pot. And to do this, I reach in with one hand and I push the clay walls out against the tool. The metal kidney itself is sort of held in place like a template, and then I push the clay from the inside out against it. And I find this helps to get really clean surfaces, as well as imparting very little stress and force onto the thin walls. If instead I simply gouge the metal straight into the walls, without one hand on the inside to brace it, there's a high chance the tool would just catch on the clay as it dries, and the whole vessel will be drawn off centre, and even destroyed. As for the last plane of clay on this vase, the shoulder, I felt that it was just a little bit too soft and thin in order to straighten it and to clean off the slip effectively. So I just blasted it with a heat gun for a few moments, so the pot could hold its shape more easily, without any fear of it deforming or collapsing as I removed that last bit of slip from the shoulder of the pot. I've been using 2 metal kidneys for this process. There's this one, which is brass and has a slightly softer edge to it. It tends to snag on the clay slightly less than the other, so is better, perhaps, for finishing off those more delicate areas. And the one you saw me use previously is just a simple right-angled piece of steel that is incredibly sharp and peels back all the slip very quickly, leaving a lovely clean surface. As it's so sharp, it does tend to snag a lot more easily on the clay. So typically, I only use it on areas of the pot where I don't need to be so careful. The holes you see in the brass kidney are really useful too, as I can stick my finger or thumb through them as I hold it, just for some added security. Finally, I drape a chamois leather over the rim to soften and smoothen it. And then it's time to remove the vessel from the wheel. And to do this more neatly, I thought I should use the heat gun again, just to slightly dry the area I'll be clasping and picking the pot away from. I also removed the last bit of water from the inside, and smoothed the interior form too. I then drag a sharp twisted metal wire underneath the pot to separate it from the wheel head, and then with dry hands I carefully grip the pot and set it aside with the other thrown pieces, all of which I'll leave out overnight to dry out into a state called leather hard. At the moment, if I were to try and pick these pots up, they'd simply squash and collapse in my hands. But come morning, lots of the moisture these pots contain will have evaporated, and I'll be able to easily pick them up and move them around and trim away the excess in the base, together with refining the rest of the piece too. I begin by brushing some slip onto the bottom of the pot, and then strike the piece rhythmically in the same spot until it spins perfectly in the middle of the wheel, a process called tap centering. And lastly, I secure it in place even further by squashing down a tiny portion of the wall into the metal of the wheel head. I then gauge the thickness with my hands, running them up and down the walls to see where's thick and where it's thin, and then I can begin to trim, removing layer by layer, refining the form and narrowing the base even further. As I trim, I'm connecting my 2 hands, resting the wrist of my left hand on the ball of my thumb on the right hand, and through much of this process you'll see that I connect both my hands, just as a way of adding stability to the blade's movement. When they aren't connected, like you see here, I instead brace my hand very firmly onto the plastic wheel tray and lean my upper body weight onto that arm to stabilise it. You can see the difference the trimming makes. The surfaces become smoother and straighter, and the edges between the planes become more pronounced. I then just scrape over each turned section with a flat metal edge, just to ensure they're straight and to remove the more prominent marks left by the trimming process. These sharp tungsten carbide tools can leave a slightly chattered surface on the clay, which is an effect sometimes done purposefully, as it leaves sort of sporadic indentations, which can actually end up creating quite interesting patterns, but they aren't for me. So once trimmed over with these tungsten carbide tools, the cleanup with the metal kidney also helps to remove any chattering that's left. I know some of you watching in this instance will question why I left that big scratch on the surface around the waist, and I did so because, ultimately, when these are glazed, any small indentation like that on the surface will simply be hidden beneath a thick layer of molten glass. As for the waist and the shoulder portion, and the rim too, there wasn't much clay to remove. Instead, the trimming here is more just a process of refining the shape. For the rim section, I switched to a much more delicate turning tool, one that I can tuck into this corner without impacting the shoulder section beneath it. I want this section of the pot to be quite sharp, so as it's glazed and fired, it almost punctures through the glass that's covered over it, and hopefully, as this is a very high iron clay body, where the clay does break through, it'll become quite metallic and iridescent. I then scrape away the seal I left on the base and tuck the sharp end of the knife beneath the pot and slice through the slip that was holding it down. The vessel's then flipped upside down and placed back onto the wheel head, and then once again I tap center it so it spins directly in the middle of the wheel. I then tuck in 3 lumps of soft clay around the rim, which hopefully should be enough to hold the pot in place. And as I push this clay down, I try to keep one hand on the pot itself, just so it doesn't skid off center as I push the lugs of clay against it. I then use a tool called a spinner, which a potter and engineer creates called Richard Carter. Through this, I can apply downward pressure that is distributed across the entire base of the pot. The white part spins and the black part stays stationary, and it means my fingertips aren't sanded raw after a day spent trimming quite groggy clay. The main purpose of the tool though is to apply downward pressure through, which helps to keep the pot pinned down against the wheel head, as there is a tendency at this point, say if the tool you're trimming with catches or snags on the clay, that the whole vessel will suddenly jump up out of the security of the lugs. If that happens, then the pot needs to be centered again, and the lugs of clay that secure it in place need to be repositioned too. But if you push down with quite a lot of pressure from above, then hopefully this won't happen, even if the tool does catch. Now that the base section of the pot has been trimmed to a narrow enough foot, it's now time to trim the actual base of the pot itself, but not before I give this surface one last scrape clean. And then remove the spinner and turn a beveled edge onto this outer section. And even though the spinner tool isn't there, I'm still applying downward pressure with my middle finger, which is pushing right into the middle of the pot. And as you might also notice, as I trim, once again my hands are connecting, bracing against each other. Next I trim the base, to remove not only the wiring off marks, which you can still see, but also to remove the last bit of excess weight in the pot. As I trim, the most focused point of the turning is in the very centre of the pot, which together with my middle finger are once again pushing down in the centre to ensure that the pot stays in place as I turn. As I go, I periodically push down with my thumb, and if I feel the clay begin to flex inward, even just a little bit, I know it's time to stop trimming. As I was able to trim down further than I expected, I spend a moment going over this beveled edge again. And as the surface the trimming creates can be quite rough, as all the particles of grog are dragged through the clay, I'll burnish over the base with the smooth section of a metal kidney, just to compress back in any specks of sand, and to just generally give it a smoother finish. It's almost more important to do this on the base, as it's the only section of the pot which won't be glazed, so the clay here will remain visible forever. Finally it's stamped with my maker's mark, and from this point it'll sit out in the open, slowly turn bone dry over a couple of days, ready for the next part of the process. The bisque firing, glazing, and finally a reduction firing in my gas kiln. Otherwise, that's all for this week. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.